Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Fsdc webinar. Today, we are launching a report entitled Cybersecurity Strategy for Hong Kong's Financial Services Industry. My name is Rocky Tong. I'm the Head of Policy Research with the Fsdc. I guess everyone in the audience would agree that you have spent a lot more time online in the past year or two, due in part to the pandemic that has introduced a new model of work. But even before the pandemic, technology adoption was accelerating as it's silently become a part of our everyday life. From making a purchase in physical supermarkets, to online shopping, to opening a virtual bank account, to say the least. Digital revolution is right before us. Again, against this backdrop, it's safe to say that cyber safety is a cross-industry, cross-boundary subject matter. Among other industries, financial services industry is a prime target of cybercriminals who have caused tremendous economic, regulatory, and reputational harm over the years. Given the heightened intensity of how technology is integrated in our everyday life, the future cyber universe will become more complex, presenting a more urgent need to combat related risks. Here comes the key research question of our study and the main theme of our webinar today, which is to examine how Hong Kong, as an international financial center, is prepared for preventing and handling cyber risk and what more can be done. Today, we are very delighted to have four distinguished speakers with us. The first is Mr. Jim Lai, board member of the Fsdc and is a co-leader of our working group. In his day job, he is the vice president of Tencent and the chairperson of Fusion Bank. Ms. Karen Chan, she's a co-leader of our cybersecurity working group, and in her day job, she's a partner with Davis Polk and Watwell. Mr. Victor Ho, a member of our Mainland Opportunities Committee, and he is also in this working group. He is the managing partner of Allen and Overy, Beijing and Shanghai office. Last but not the least, it is Dr. King Yao. He is the executive director of the Fsdc, and he runs our everyday operation. So welcome, everyone. Today's session features three main parts, and the very important part of giving your feedback. The first part is a presentation to be made by Karen, and after that, she will be joined by the three gentlemen who will be sharing some, insights with regard to cybersecurity and our findings in the report. Then we are going to open the floor to a Q&A session, which will last around 15 minutes. And then, we would ask you to provide us with some feedback to our future operation of webinar model. So without further ado, Karen, I'll pass the floor to you. And for people in the audience, if you have any questions during the course of this presentation, do shoot us some Q&A. Do shoot us some questions in the Q&A box that is underneath. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karen. I'm the co-chair of the Fsdc's working group on cybersecurity, along with Jim. And I'm very happy, very excited today to welcome you all here and to introduce the Fsdc's latest, and I should say very timely and topical paper, Cybersecurity Strategy for Hong Kong's Financial Services Industry. We've put together some slides to help frame our discussions today, so let's get started with those. Next slide. I'm sure you've seen recent headlines over the last few months, and I think we can all feel that cyber threats are getting worse, but just how much worse? That's always been hard to measure or quantify. And there was this Financial Times article last week, which talked about recent spikes in the cyber insurance cost. And I think that gives us some useful insight into the scale of the problem. And the report cited statistics from an insurance broker, which showed that from the start of this April to mid-May, premiums on cyber insurance policies increased by 27% from last year's levels, obviously caused by the severity and frequency of cyber attacks. And I guess it's not just a question of increasing cost either, because some insurers are also analyzing more closely the level of controls, the cybersecurity controls at the company seeking cover, which likely would lead to the result that, if a company has very low controls or very low cyber defenses, then they will likely be charged more and may struggle to find an adequate level of cyber insurance. And in the article also, one of the brokers interviewed for the story noted that both their claims environment and the cyber threat environment are significantly worse than just 2 years ago. And this reference in this article to 2 years ago, I think is particularly relevant here, as that is also around the time that the working group first started planning for this paper. And at that time, I don't think we ever could have imagined just how central the question of cybersecurity would become to our lives in 2021. Of course, it was already an important topic then, increasingly moving its way up the business agendas, regulators' agendas, and government bodies' agendas, but it certainly wasn't in the headlines on an almost daily basis like it is today. The outbreak of COVID, which as we now all know too well, has forced us and our families to live so much more of our work and educational and social lives online, and that primes us for more attacks by increasingly sophisticated criminals. And the targets are everyone in both the public and private sectors. And as referenced in the slide, the financial services sector is particularly vulnerable to cyber attacks, which, bringing it back to the paper we're introducing today, the working group's mandate grew out of two key concerns in particular. Firstly, to ensure that Hong Kong's cybersecurity strategy and framework is at a minimum keeping pace with other similarly placed international financial centers. And secondly, to consider what initiatives the Hong Kong government, including key regulators in the financial services sector, might take in order to more proactively position Hong Kong to get ready for and ensure a robust cybersecurity environment, particularly bearing in mind Hong Kong's natural strengths in the area of financial sector innovation. Next slide. One of the key questions considered by the working group, it was the question of whether Hong Kong is an obvious target for cyber attacks. The answer was a resounding yes. But what the working group also tried to analyze, but was unable to determine from the data available, was whether Hong Kong was more of a target than other major cities, because the data only really makes clear that the city is a prime target for cyber attacks, with the number of incidents and their financial impact steadily increasing. The working group also considered the related question of Hong Kong's overall level of preparedness to protect against cyber attacks. We discussed with a number of local Hong Kong cyber experts last year, and the conclusion we drew was that Hong Kong's overall level of preparedness is somewhat uneven. If you look at the financial sector in particular, the experts consulted all agreed that as a whole, the financial sector is better placed than other local industry sectors. But within the financial sector, the level of preparedness actually varies quite widely. And the larger institutions, unsurprisingly, have the resources required to continuously enhance their cyber readiness to meet the evolving threats, whereas the smaller institutions tend to remain more static in their approach. And so in considering how to raise Hong Kong's overall level of preparedness, the working group was careful to ensure that the delicate balance of maintaining a cyber safe yet still business-friendly environment is met. Next slide. So now we come to the part I'm very excited about. What are the practical recommendations to facilitate all this, to enhance the resilience of Hong Kong's cybersecurity framework, and to enable us to positively distinguish ourselves from our global counterparts? There are 5 high-level recommendations, which we have put in 3 general buckets. First, at the policy level, and at the legal and regulatory level, and finally, at the operational level. We will move into the meat of these recommendations in the following slides. Next slide. So the first recommendation is at the policy level and suggests that Hong Kong develop a dedicated cybersecurity safety roadmap with policy priorities. And I'm happy to say that Hong Kong would not be starting from scratch in this regard. We have our existing cyber smart city blueprint, which actually incorporates cyberspace security safety into its framework. However, the working group is of the view that a specific policy document dedicated to cybersecurity would help raise the profile of cybersecurity. And we think that it needs to clearly outline short, medium, and long-term action points, because it is important to get these initiatives known by the market and by the public so that they can act and respond accordingly. With reference to other jurisdictions, there's usually a structured citywide or nationwide strategy on cybersecurity, spelling out actionable items under a range of areas. For example, introducing a new act within a certain time frame, or committing to allocate a certain percentage of government budget to cybersecurity, etc. And these are just a few examples of potential actionable items. But what we think is that clearer work plans with policy priorities over a longer time horizon should be able to facilitate different stakeholders, including businesses in Hong Kong, to coordinate and make their part of contribution correspondingly. Because cybersecurity is an issue which is relevant to all industry sectors, so it makes sense to have a more holistic approach. Some jurisdictions like Australia and Singapore, they have an independent commission dedicated and responsible for cybersecurity, so that is one approach that Hong Kong might consider taking. With the formation of this, a single agency, all initiatives relating to cybersecurity, from local capacity building, infrastructure review, or international partnership, they can all be brought under this one agency. Next slide. Now, turning to the legal and regulatory level, the paper makes two recommendations. The first relates to the statutory position, namely a recommendation for Hong Kong to consider what has worked for other leading jurisdictions and pass an omnibus cybersecurity or cyberspace protection law, covering, for example, areas like who would fall within critical information infrastructure, and also establishing a framework for accountability in relation to cyber incidents, including investigation and enforcement actions for cybersecurity incidents, and also setting out perhaps a light touch licensing framework for cybersecurity service providers. Having this would provide Hong Kong citizens and businesses with a higher degree of legal certainty and protection. The introduction of such legislation can also, go hand in hand with the effective operation of what we talked about previously, that cybersecurity roadmap. Next slide. And the second recommendation in the legal and regulatory space relates to the financial services sector. Because there is so much interconnection, so much interconnectedness across different sectors within the financial system, a lot of the time cyber incidents faced by one sector can easily have a spillover effect to other sectors. So what we think is that an effective cybersecurity framework needs a coordinated approach amongst various financial regulators. We, of course, recognize that all the key regulators, SFC, the HKMA, and the Insurance Authority, they all have their own and well-working cybersecurity initiatives and frameworks. And the working group suggestion here is that the various financial regulators can perhaps work together to harmonize and coordinate their cybersecurity regulatory frameworks. A potential area for such harmonization is, let's say, the reporting time frame in cases where a cyber incident is detected. Because currently there are different guidelines. Some you need to do it immediately, some you need to do it as soon as practical, and some within a number of hours, let's say 72 hours. So while we, the working group, we do appreciate that the regulatory approaches adopted by the various regulators are catered for the unique business operations of each sector, but of the market participants that we talk to, especially those who work directly in cybersecurity tasks, they have expressed the view that perhaps a single reporting timeframe might ease the compliance burden of financial market participants answering to multiple regulators. And I guess there are many ways to do this. This could be done, for example, as we said in the paper, by setting up a cross-agency steering group to look at coordinating issues. And we've seen it done for other initiatives such as the green and sustainable finance. So we believe this cooperation can be extended to cybersecurity too. Next slide. Now, finally, we turn to the operational level where we have two recommendations. The first is geared at encouraging the development of local cybersecurity talent in Hong Kong. Suggestions for how to do this involve, for example, building on HKMA's competency enhancement framework, because clearly the market has generally observed an improvement in the cyber resilience level of the banking sector since that initiative. But given how interconnected we are between the various financial sectors, the banking sector's progress could be undermined if other sectors do not have a comparable degree of resilience. So what we're recommending is that other financial regulators could consider joining hands to build on this competency enhancement framework and develop it into an overarching structure with specialized streams of expertise so that everyone can achieve a basic high level of a standard. And for example, a good starting point would be a list of recommended or approved cybersecurity certification schemes for staff working in various sectors. And also another approach to perhaps help overcome this manpower shortage challenge is for the Hong Kong government to perhaps consider providing incentives such as training subsidies to eligible staff or institutions if they enroll in a cybersecurity certification scheme recognized by the regulators. And I guess a longer term project might be for Hong Kong to establish a specialized cybersecurity training institute, similar to what China and Australia have done. Next slide. The final recommendation is focused on ensuring that the financial sector is as prepared as it can be to face the current and future cyber threat environment. And to this end, we suggest actions to operationalize preparedness at the industry level through industry-wide stress tests and data recovery plan enhancements. Works on cyber risk stress testing in Hong Kong actually are being done, but they have been done in silos and are largely focused on the banking sector. And multiple government bodies have actually worked closely with different stakeholders to conduct cyber incident drills. For example, the Cybercrime Bureau within the police force, they've offered cybersecurity drills for virtual banks to raise their preparedness for cyber attacks prior to commencing their operation in 2019. And some of the regulators have also conducted self-assessment and intelligence-led cyber attack simulation testing to help banking institutions evaluate their cyber resilience. And also, very pleased to say, at the industry-led level, there are also annual cyber crisis simulations. So then all the banks who participated in these programs and these projects reported that they found all these exercises very useful in assessing their cyber resilience. But what the working group feels is that stress tests focusing on only a couple of financial sectors may not be adequate for financial center of Hong Kong's prominence. And given the increasing interconnectedness of different sectors within financial services, as well as the constantly evolving nature of complex cyber attacks, perhaps an industry-wide stress test covering all relevant sectors is highly recommended. Next slide. So that is a quick walkthrough of the recommendations made in the FSDC cybersecurity paper, which we look forward to exploring in more detail during this session.
Thank you very much, Karen. Okay, so we are starting the next session very shortly. Thank you, Karen, for a very detailed walkthrough of what we said in the paper, which is now available on our website, together with other collaterals such as a one-pager, as well as the press release. So do feel free to visit our website and download such materials. And as you continue to do so, I'm going to start our panel session. Karen is now joined by three gentlemen. And the first question I would like to ask our Executive Director, Dr. King Ao. King, in fact, we've published quite a few papers in 2017 about, our focus on fintech, and perhaps you can tell us a little bit why the FSDC considers cybersecurity as an important subject to be studied, and why do we launch the report now?
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the working group for this excellent paper and recommendations under the leadership of Karen and Jim. So going back to your question, I think Karen and you mentioned earlier, we are now in a digital age. So cybercrime is becoming very prevalent. Basically, the cyber universe is now very complex. And that's why there's an urgent need to come up with a holistic framework to help consolidate Hong Kong as an international financial center, because we're talking about virtual assets becoming the future of finance, right? And that also needs protection. But if you look at the financial services industry, I think we are probably better equipped than other sectors because our industry is highly regulated. But even then, if you look at whether we are well prepared, for the development of cybersecurity, I'm afraid we are not there yet, because according to the survey done by Hong Kong Enterprise Cybersecurity back in 2020, our readiness only has a score of 46.9 out of 100. So that means we need to do a lot more. And that's why the working group has embarked on the study and come up with the recommendations. So on this note, I think, given our recommendation, we would like to encourage more public and private sector collaboration to take the initiative forward, because it needs the efforts from everyone to attack this complex issue. So I'm sure our other speakers will expand on this later on.
Thank you. Thank you very much, King. Now I would like to turn to Jim. Jim, you wear multiple hats, not only in the public sector, but also in the private sector. The two companies that you serve, Tencent and Fusion Bank, one is of course, a technology giant. The other is, one of the leading virtual banks in our city. So I wonder, from your perspective, how would you describe cybersecurity to your businesses?
Thank you, Rocky. Cybersecurity is the backbone of our business at Tencent. This is because our services are 100% offered online to a massive number of users, covering many aspects of living, work, education, and entertainment, involving both users' online and offline activities. Therefore, the smooth offering of service online without disruption in a secure way is of greatest importance. A stable and reliable offering of online services is a critical component of good customer experience, which is instrumental to our continued success. So, for example, in our payment business in mainland China, we have 900 million monthly active users. So how to offer a very secure, resilient payment network to all these customers and our business partners is of very importance. And throughout these many years, we have accumulated very strong and resilient technology practice measures and a proven track record to offer these services in a secure way. This is actually at the backbone of our business.
Thanks a lot, Jim. Karen, I'm going to go back to you, even though you gave us a very thorough walkthrough of our paper. For that, besides leading our efforts, you also advise major financial institutions and corporates in regulatory and internal investigations, including those related to technology breach. So can you perhaps share with us some of the distinct characteristics in terms of the setup of regulatory framework in some of these, like industry participants?
Sure. So the Hong Kong regulatory framework on cybersecurity, like I said, is predominantly sector-based at this point in time, with the city's financial services regulators, the SFC, the Monetary Authority, and the IA, Insurance Authority, leading the charge and establishing standards and procedures for those financial institutions who are licensed or otherwise supervised by them. And this is not particularly surprising given the city's traditional focus on financial services and the fact that the Hong Kong financial services sector has a well-deserved reputation for being one of the most innovative and forward-looking in the world. And I guess the more decentralized approach in Hong Kong does differ from some of the other jurisdictions we looked at, which have more of a top-down cyber strategy and regulatory framework set up by the government with, for example, a single regulator responsible for cybersecurity. But as our paper indicates, the difference in approach does not appear to have resulted in a material difference in exposure to cyber risk. And in terms of other key characteristics, I would point to the HKMA's holistic approach to cybersecurity as demonstrated through what I kind of mentioned before, its cybersecurity fortification initiative, which was first introduced in 2016 to raise the cyber resilience of Hong Kong's banking system. And the CFI has three main work streams. There is a CRAF, the Cyber Resilience Assessment Framework. There's also a professional development program and also a cyber intelligence sharing platform. And late last year, they also launched an upgraded version of this, of the CFI 2.0. And this upgrade followed a broad review of the CFI through market studies, interviews, and surveys, followed by extensive industry consultation. And I think that review, which shows that a deep engagement between the regulator and the industry participants on cybersecurity showed that the banking industry is strongly supportive of the CFI, and in particular, the CRAF was singled out for high praise, with over 90% of banks finding it useful, especially in identifying previously unrecognized gaps in their cyber defenses. So it's, yeah.
Thanks a lot, Karen. Well, from what you shared a moment ago, I feel that Hong Kong is right up there. And so I would like to jump to Victor. Victor, based on what Karen mentioned a moment ago, and the very fact that you have worked as a legal professional in various markets, perhaps you can highlight the key similarities and differences between Hong Kong's regulatory regime and, say, the ones in mainland China, EU, or the US?
Yeah, thanks, Rocky. I think the consistent message you're getting out of the paper, out of the presentation, out of all the speakers, is Hong Kong has its strengths, particularly with a more decentralized type of approach, which ensures strong initiative out of the different silos. The complexity of the topic, as Dr. Al was mentioning, really does necessitate a holistic approach. So if you look at other jurisdictions, that is to differing degrees depending on where they're coming from, they have these more holistic approaches in place. Obviously, China has taken a very, very systematic approach to things. And from that point of view, their approach to things are extremely comprehensive. EU, the same, based off of GDPR. The US, even as you've most recently seen with ransomware type of incidents, that is ramping up the US type of response. So I think it's very, very important to keep in mind that what we've included in the paper here is building a holistic foundation. And like Jim was saying, it's very, very important to get across confidence in a reliable system, particularly as technology and digitalization continues to accelerate. So this becomes a foundation for more innovation that is only going to be coming down the pipeline. So again, going back to your question, other jurisdictions are very much embarking on this with this holistic approach.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Victor. Just want to thank you very much for your answers first. And I would like to encourage people in the audience to raise your questions via the Q&A box. I noticed that we have around 400 people online, so I'm sure some of you may have some questions for us. And with that, in fact, I would like to ask King to follow up on the cross-market comparison. Victor gave us an overview of how we are compared to the other markets, say, mainland China and the others. King, is Hong Kong facing a high level of cyber risk, and how is such risk level compared to the other markets?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes, I'm afraid, because as we alluded to earlier, Hong Kong being an international financial center is definitely a prime target. In fact, according to the IBM study, Hong Kong is classified as one of the main targets for cybercrime in the region. I can back it up with some numbers. According to the Hong Kong Computer Emergency Response Team Coordination Center report, the number of cybersecurity breaches in Hong Kong has gone up quite a lot. Give you some idea, in 2020, last year, we had 39,000 to be exact, of unique security events involving malware hosting, phishing, and so on. And there's also another set of numbers that's quite staggering, is the financial losses. The latest figure we have is for 2019, and the figure came to 2.9 billion Hong Kong dollar. That's more than 370 million US dollar. We have all heard of phone scams in Hong Kong and so on. By comparison, back in 2020, the total loss due to phone scam was only 73 million Hong Kong dollar. And yet we have headlines every day, more or less, during those intense period, during the reporting period. But you compare that to the cyber crime losses, that's very insignificant. So that's why we really need to come up with a more coordinated approach, not just for the industry, I think for the whole of Hong Kong.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much, King. Karen, King has highlighted that like Hong Kong is in fact facing quite a few cyber attacks, and not only on a daily basis, but also the impact of it is quite significant as well. So perhaps you can share with us how ready Hong Kong's cybersecurity regime is up for the challenges that he mentioned. And a follow-up question is, there must be some weaknesses in our current system. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to write this paper. So perhaps you can highlight some of the weaknesses that we are currently facing.
Okay. So as our paper highlights, the Hong Kong is largely, I think, keeping pace with the other major jurisdictions in terms of its readiness to tackle the fast-growing and evolving universe of cyber risks. So I would say we are generally as ready as other cities, and that any so-called weaknesses are not really exclusive to Hong Kong. I guess one such area is the level of preparedness, across industry sectors is kind of patchy. Our paper includes, the view of many local cybersecurity experts that, whilst companies in local financial sector have a relatively high level of cyber resilience, particularly amongst the larger institutions with an international footprint, other industry sectors might be considered to be slightly struggling in this regard. And so I think, I think the recent the Hong Kong Enterprise Cybersecurity Readiness Index, it does show that of the 6 sectors kind of reviewed for the index, the financial services sector demonstrated, the highest level of readiness. But for companies outside the financial sector, the level of readiness seems to be much lower, with specific weaknesses identified in relation to non-technical solutions, for example, training and awareness building. So given the cross-sectoral nature of cyber risk, this low level of readiness in non-financial businesses could indirectly threaten financial institutions in Hong Kong. For example, hacked information about employees of non-financial businesses could be used to launch targeted attacks on their bank accounts with financial institutions. And I guess the other challenge facing Hong Kong, as well as other major financial centers in Asia, is the shortage of locally based cybersecurity expertise. Some of the regulators have made, like the MA, are making good strides in this area. For example, establishing the competency frameworks for cybersecurity, as I mentioned earlier. But the working group believes that bigger and more coordinated action in this area is needed to help fill the talent gap.
Thank you very much, Karen. So these risk or weaknesses, so to speak, are not unique to Hong Kong, but rather, is really something that is faced by, other major jurisdiction, especially financial centers. Point taken. Victor, you did quite a bit for our paper, and I would like to bring some attention to this, which is how is Hong Kong compared to the other major markets in terms of cybersecurity culture, noting that the culture itself is going to lead to some differences in planning and readiness and whatnot. So perhaps you can walk us through that part of the paper.
Okay, again, we've been talking about a holistic, coordinated approach. And we're talking about resiliency and considering, again, that this is a fast-moving area and a developing area. It does come down to that cliche that you're only as strong as your weakest link. And from that point of view, as Karen is mentioning, you don't have uniformity of approach. And so there are certain sectors which are strong, financial services sector, in particular, but as you get into more digital innovation, as Jim was mentioning, as digital becomes even more retail in its delivery of financial inclusion, then it becomes even more important that a cybersecurity mindset, an approach is put forward into the community and the community at large, cross-sector, and so forth. So Karen was mentioning a wide range of additional specific areas, including the talent gap, and so forth and so on. So from a cultural point of view, again, I think we are talking, and I'm sorry to beat on this drum, about a holistic approach, which applies across the board.
Thanks a lot, loud and clear. Jim, I'm going to turn to you since you run very important businesses. So from the business perspective, how is we learned from you and also the other speakers that cybersecurity is extremely important. And perhaps can you share with us if so, how do you feel that cybersecurity is of even high importance to the financial services sector than the others?
Thank you, Rocky. Financial services is an industry that is built around data and the flow of data. These include customer information, asset prices, order sizes, timestamps, and so on. In this sense, financial services is essentially a data business. As such, one could argue that cybersecurity is of even high importance for the financial services industry compared to many of the rest of the economy. First, I think also highlight in our paper on page 3, the cost of cyber risk is on the rise, and financial services industry is most attacked. We have included in our paper a source from IBM that among all the total attacks in 2020, 23% is to the financial services industry. So this is very important. And secondly, the leak or loss of data can cause customers and counterparties to lose trust, and that alone can make or break a financial services company. And thirdly, data loss and misuse may also lead to serious contractual or even legal consequences. So this is really important.
Thanks a lot, Jim. I see that we have a bunch of questions coming from the floor. But before that, I would like to address a couple of questions. And perhaps I will stick with you, Jim. So as a co-leader of the working group, can you perhaps share with us some of the key government-led cybersecurity related initiatives on talent development, and how may we take it forward?
Thank you, Rocky. Talent development is very important. We will continue to see a shortage of supply of talent, which means that we need to put more effort in developing them. As Karen has highlighted in our presentation, and also you can see on page 24 of the paper, we have highlighted the enhancement of talent development as one of our key recommendations on the operational level. The regulators, for example, could work on a joint cybersecurity competency framework across the financial services industry. An example of this is in January 2021, the government extended the technology talent admission scheme to cover all companies in Hong Kong conducting research and development in areas including cybersecurity. The streamline of procedures will help expedite the admission of cybersecurity technology talents to Hong Kong from different parts of the world. However, it is equally, if not more important, to nurture local cybersecurity talent. The government could consider a cybersecurity-focused version of the FinTech anti-epidemic scheme for talent development, which is also called the FAT program, to sponsor full-time new hires in the sector. We also see the tertiary education in Hong Kong is relatively doing a better job. As we see, universities in Hong Kong were among some of the first in Asia to incorporate industry-ready cybersecurity elements into the curriculum. We see that both bachelor and master programs have cybersecurity as the focus in the Hong Kong universities. And we can also draw reference to what's happening in mainland China, as the government plans to establish a number of well-renowned cybersecurity schools by 2027 to build a strong group of professionals to combat cyber attacks. As of 2019, 11 universities in China have been selected to participate in this initiative. So Hong Kong, in the tertiary and continuing education level, we are doing a good job, and we can continue to keep referencing to our peers in the region. And lastly, I think the financial services and technology sectors also have to have an important role to play, in addition to government-led initiatives. The Cyberport, for instance, has highlighted cybersecurity as one of its key focuses. And also, the Tencent Finance Academy Hong Kong, if I may quote as an example, has signed an MOU with the Hong Kong UST to develop a FinTech case study series of a program for tertiary education purposes. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jim. There are a few questions in relation to talent, so I'm going to stick with this topic for now. One of these questions is about in the technology world. Sometimes we are still while we are still focusing on manual labor, learning and picking up new technologies. Going forward, machine learning is going to be something that is of interest and potentially be a new trend. So how ready is our talent pool performing so far? And assuming that, between now and the future, there's a gap. And what should we do about it? Perhaps some of the other panelists can, give us an answer to this question. Victor, maybe?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start first. I mean, if you look at page 17 of our report, I think the talent pool deficit, the fact that 1.2% that we managed to research of our IT professionals are focused on IT security already is a glaring number. So I think that already speaks for itself. Now, going to your point about putting in better tech to go ahead and improve security and resiliency. Well, this is a never-ending story about staying several steps ahead and being best in class. And that's what really is the fundamental purpose of the paper, is for Hong Kong to be really a leader on the cybersecurity side longer term. Short term, in order to cover the talent gap, yes, outsourcing or going elsewhere to bring in talent and do it remotely, so forth, that all helps. But I think, again, it goes back to the very fundamental point. If we are talking about creating a bedrock and a foundation for Hong Kong to continue to flourish this way, it is a matter of investing in this portion of the infrastructure, and that starts with talent. Keep in mind that when we talk about risks, we're talking about it at every level. It can be on data, it can be on the IT stack, so it's at several levels, because that is where the possible threats may occur. So even if you look at the ransomware type of incidents which have been happening more broadly, that is a complex kind of attack, which then results in a different kind of solution, a multidisciplinary solution.
Thanks. Anyone else would like to add to this point?
Yeah, I just want to quickly echo that we are very well positioned to become a regional hub for talent development, given how sophisticated our financial market is. If anything, we will be the first one to be attacked. So I think that's why we also need to quicken up our pace on talent and capacity building. Good. Okay. This is.
I would just also like to add a point that it will be very valuable for universities, the industries, and the government to work hand in hand together to build platforms to train the local talent. On one hand, the universities, they can attract students that have interest to fill this gap in talent. And secondly, for industry, we have a lot of real-life use cases of how to combat different real-life cases to protect a large number of users on a resilient network. These use cases would be very beneficial to the students to be exposed to these real-life cases, to actually learn about practical skills and exposure so that they can be well prepared when they graduate and step out in the society to make real contributions. And the governments already have different subsidized schemes, and I think it will be very valuable to the society as a whole if we can have a better promotion and a better channel to channel these government subsidies to our students and companies as a whole.
And can I just add too that because talent shortage, I guess, is a critical issue, not just in Asia, it's kind of everywhere. It's still a talent shortage is an issue. So like Victor said, you can hire abroad, that's a quick but quite costly fix to the talent shortage problem, to import talent from other markets when they are also in shortage. So I think there's a real need to develop our own local talent pool. And one thing that we can learn from, like mainland China is that they do have a dedicated cybersecurity training institute, and that is a crop that that's only growing. And I think we can look into that to consider how we can enhance our talent development.
Fantastic. Obviously talent is something of interest to the industry, with 4 panelists all chipped in to this topic. Very interesting. I come across this question, which is also very interesting. When it comes to cybersecurity, right? Like everybody feels that it is an expense item on the balance on the P&L. So and then do we see that there are business opportunities presented in developing a cybersecurity business or something like that? Any panelists would like to address that question?
I'll have a go first. We already touched on training, so definitely that's a business opportunity. But there are others as well, like insurance. We touched on cyber insurance. This is a fast-growing market. Again, based on some statistics that we have, even though it's a bit outdated. But back in 2019, globally, cyber insurance business went up by 25%. And the size was quite small, only 7 billion, but it's expected to grow at least 4 times in a few years' time by 2025 to $27 billion US. But I think that probably is an underestimate, given what has happened recently in the States and also even in this part of Asia, that some companies have got hacked through ransomware. But from an investment perspective, it also offers a lot of opportunities. A lot of tech companies, fintech or cyber tech, actually offers good investment opportunities to venture capitalists in Hong Kong. And some of you may already know that Hong Kong is the second largest PE market outside of China. Well, in the region after China. So definitely there's a lot of capital available going into this. And again, based on some figures that I have, in Q4 2019, the amount of investment went into cyber-related startups was close to $6 billion US. And that includes M&As as well. So you can see that the opportunity set is huge.
Good. Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree with King. I think there's a big market for companies to go into this area and offer outsourced cybersecurity services. Firstly, in Hong Kong, there's a large number of SMEs that it will be too costly for them to hire in-house cybersecurity talent, partly because there's a shortage of supply. And so if any companies can offer solution to a large number of SMEs, it can offer economy of scale that can benefit as a very good business model for these companies. And secondly, for the financial institutions that are regulated. So the regulators will have different requirements on the services offered by some proven companies with proven services in vertical niches. So this also offers a very good growth opportunity for companies to be in this space, to provide services in different vertical niches to regulated financial institutions.
Good. Okay, I see that there's a participant which is who is very, very active. It is Yi Ding. He or she has asked 3 separate questions. I'm trying to just throw one at the panel, and I feel that this is very interesting. I'm not sure if I got it correctly, but in our earlier presentation, we mentioned that Hong Kong faces a high rate of cyber attack incidents here. Can we address why, and then where do we get such data? That's point number 1. And is the high percentage in Hong Kong showing our transparency where other jurisdictions do not review their incidents? So whether or not such aggregation of data is scientific, perhaps that is the question, Yi Ding. Sorry, there are quite a few questions from you, but I can't throw everybody throw all the questions to the panel. But I think this question is quite important. Do we see that the high number being that is distorted because we are disclosing all the data, but the other jurisdictions don't? Well, is anyone in the panel who is capable of answering this question? Well, perhaps I can have a go. Well, for such data, you can refer to our report. There's a source of data from the chart, and that's point number 1. Whether or not in terms of data disclosure, to me, I feel that all the all the jurisdictions have their own definition of cyber attacks and their disclosure measures. At the same time, given that when we compile the report, we do look at one single source for it, and that particular source should try to generalize across various jurisdictions, and that's our take on your question. I'll move on to the other questions. And this is one very interesting from Sean He. He mentioned that many Hong Kong financial firms clients face cyber fraud. Criminals locate all around the world and are difficult to investigate because of cross-border jurisdiction. Any measures to solve the problem?
Well, Rocky, let me partially answer that. I think a lot of the questions even the earlier one from Yiding that you answered about transparency. Hong Kong's opportunity is obviously its free markets, its financial dynamism, and so forth. So China obviously has a very, very strong cybersecurity and data regime, and so that allows them to be quite protective. It's quite different from the open borders that Hong Kong's financial markets and its roles play in that respect. So obviously that makes Hong Kong a more apt target for any kind of attack and the financial dimension of money leaving Hong Kong and so forth. So firstly, and that underscores all the more reason why a security approach becomes crucial to continue to shore up confidence and resiliency here. Now, an extension of that in terms of being able to pursue is obviously already the unique legal system which Hong Kong does have, which allows judgments here to be made and to be issued by Hong Kong courts and so forth, to then go ahead and pursue incidents of crime on a cross-jurisdictional basis. So again, this Hong Kong does have that foundation. Building out further is going to require Hong Kong to continue to play its important role that it does play now. But it does have that foundation in place, which again is a major advantage.
Thanks. Rocky, I want to go back to the question earlier about the transparency and definition. I think that's why, in our recommendation, we propose that there should be a single agency for coordination, for setting standard, for sharing information, so that everyone is on the same page when we look at cyber risk.
Good. Thank you. There's a question about how we can best learn from other people's mistake. Well, I think that is a very good question, because learning from our own mistake would be very costly. So, well, perhaps we can take a look at how other people how other people have dealt with cyber incidents and try to learn that. So is there any way that we can advise the government to do it for the business sector?
I have a few, because I think that looking at the paper, the view of the working group is that, practice kind of makes perfect, or at least close to perfect, because in that regard, we strongly advocate the government to consider establishing a series of industry-wide cyber risk stress tests as a matter of priority. This is how we learn from mistakes. Some things that happen elsewhere, we try to test it on our systems and see if we are ready for it. So while there's quite a lot of good work being done in Hong Kong in conducting these stress tests, both at the regulator and the industry level, I think it has largely been in silos, as we've said, and also largely focused on the banking sector. And so, for example, as part of the CFI initiative, which I spoke about earlier, the Monetary Authority conducts these cyber attack simulation testing, which helps banks evaluate their cyber resilience. And everyone agreed it was a useful exercise. So at the industry-led level, there's also this annual whole industry simulation exercise, which draws participants from a wide range of financial services in Hong Kong. And it provides these participants with confidential institution-specific reports, which help them proactively identify weak spots. So there is no question that these existing stress tests are incredibly useful exercises, but given the increasing interconnectedness of different sectors within or outside of financial services, as well as these constantly evolving nature of these complex attacks, I think an industry-wide stress test covering all relevant sectors in Hong Kong is highly recommended. And for example, the US has done something similar, something called the Hamilton series, which we have also highlighted in the paper, which involves simulations of different types of cyber attacks against financial services sector, including on individual segments of that sector, for example, equity markets, payment systems, exchanges. And so the results of all those tests are then used to improve public and private sectors, policies, procedures, and coordination. So what we think is that we could do something similar in Hong Kong in the short to medium term, with the regulators helping to coordinate and exercise, and perhaps also something organized by the financial institutions themselves. And I guess from a longer term perspective, also the recommendations in the paper regarding building up our talent pool, through incentives for cybersecurity certification regime is also something that we could think of, to help our readiness and our competence.
Good. Anyone want to add?
I would like to make a quick point to echo Karen's point on doing the stress testing. We also noticed a number of different government departments has actually offered a lot of capabilities to do this kind of a better protection. For example, on the Legislative Council panel on Information Technology and Broadcasting, dated May 10th, we see that the Hong Kong Computer Emergency Response Team Coordination Center, which is called the HKCERT, has handled a total of 8,346 security incidents in 2020. And the Hong Kong Police Force has recorded a total of 12,916 technology crime cases in 2020, an increase of 55%. And the OGO is offering cybersecurity, preventive service and information sharing, offering a free scanning service for SMEs. Totaling 2,000 local SMEs have tried the service. So I think the government has different capabilities existing to support what Karen has brought up as a stress testing for both financial industry and also for other sectors as well.
Thank you very much. I noticed that we are already past the hour, so I would like to conclude the webinar here, but please do stay with us for the next minute or two, because we want to hear your feedback as to how this is organized and how we can improve. I noticed that there are at least 7 questions that I haven't had a chance to throw to the panel. But I'll try to do better next time, so that the panelists will be able to answer you live. Anyway, the polling is going to be up, so please do give us your feedback. Thank you. And with that, I would like to invite you to join us in thanking the 4 distinguished speakers: Karen, Jim, Victor, and Kane. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.